It is easy to mistake leverage for control. Right now, Iran appears powerful. It has taken the Strait of Hormuz hostage and holds GCC economies in its shadow. But it is common knowledge that deterrents are not permanent assets. They can be overstretched and they can decay over time. What looks like strength in the moment can become fragility if pushed too far. Iran does have leverage, and I will say again and again, but it is a double-edged sword, and assuming it holds all the cards would be a strategic miscalculation. The Strait of Hormuz is often framed as Iran's ultimate card, a choke point through which a significant portion of global energy flows. On the surface, it looks like decisive leverage, but leverage only works if it remains both credible and sustainable. If used too aggressively, it triggers something equally powerful: adaptation. Nations do not remain static under pressure. Just as Iran has adapted to sanctions, the rest of the world can adapt to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Supply chains can shift and energy routes can diversify. Malaysia, for instance, is already using rising energy insecurity as a catalyst to accelerate its green investment strategy. What seems like a permanent advantage can erode at a snap of a finger. And once that happens, the leverage does not just weaken, it disappears altogether. Iran's capability to strike its neighbors is real. But the issue is whether Iran can control escalation, because retaliation rarely remains contained. It can trigger counter-response and at times coordinated action against it. The truth is, Iran can initiate pressure more easily than it can resolve it. Therefore, it does not need to be defeated to lose. It only needs to trigger an escalation it can no longer control. This is why Iran's strategy operates in ambiguity. Its approach depends on controlled chaos, applying just enough pressure to maintain influence while avoiding actions that would provoke a unified global response. Iran's proxy networks are effective precisely because of this strategy, but the moment escalation becomes direct and obvious, the ambiguity collapses, and with it, the protective buffer it provides. For now, global restraint creates space for this strategy to function, but that restraint is not guaranteed. There is always a tipping point where nations decide that instability has gone too far. When that threshold is crossed, responses become coordinated. History shows that dogpiling is not hypothetical. It is a recurring pattern when tolerance breaks down. If that moment comes, it is not something Iran can easily neutralize. At the core of all this is the regime's primary objective: survival. While Iran may appear to have little to lose, as I mentioned in a previous video, it in fact has everything to lose because maintaining power is its ultimate goal. This creates a fundamental obstacle. The regime must project strength to deter threats, but it must also avoid actions that trigger overwhelming retaliation. A full uncontrolled escalation is not a viable strategy. It is a risk the regime cannot afford to take. Its behavior suggests it understands its limits based on the restraint it clearly shows beneath its bold rhetoric. Iran understands that once certain red lines are crossed, events can spiral beyond control. The reality is that Iran's strategy is about carefully controlling how much chaos happens, because the moment chaos becomes total, leverage collapses, adaptation accelerates, coordination emerges, and survival becomes uncertain. Iran does possess meaningful leverage, but it is neither absolute nor foolproof. It cannot go fully unhinged without risking a war it cannot survive. The Strait of Hormuz remains a powerful tool, and it remains as such for now, as I previously stated, but it is also a strategic trap. Retaliation tends to create more danger than success, and the entire approach depends on staying just below the threshold that would trigger a unified global response. Basically, it is a balancing act, and the margin for error is far thinner than it appears. Let me also add this regarding the ongoing ceasefire talks. These talks are less about resolving the conflict and more about managing it. What is happening in Pakistan is essentially a controlled release of pressure. Both sides remain distant and trust is deeply fractured, something I mentioned in a previous video. Making any meaningful agreement is unlikely at this stage. The most realistic outcome, in my view, is a temporary stabilization of tensions rather than a lasting solution, because the objective for both sides is not peace but control.